First contact. Commander Zex 427's first mistake was assuming that technological progress only moved in one direction. His second mistake was putting this assumption in his official report. As his massive form settled into the command chair of the ultimate dominance, he had no idea that both errors would soon come back to haunt him with devastating consequences. The bridge of the hegemony flagship hummed with the usual efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Holographic displays flickered with constant updates as his crew documented yet another primitive civilization for their conquest records. Zex 427 absently stirred his beverage, a violently purple liquid that would have dissolved human steel, with one of his 7 appendages while reviewing the preliminary scans of Earth. Another backwater system, he gurgled to his second-in-command, Commander Yix 299. These screening missions become more tedious with each passing cycle. Yix 299 bobbed her sensory stalks in agreement, though something about the sensor readings troubled her. Indeed, Supreme Commander, though protocol demands we document everything before initiating standard subjugation procedures. The massive viewscreen showed Earth rotating slowly below them, its blue-white marble appearance masking what their scans had revealed, a civilization still dependent on fossil fuels, primitive nuclear fission, and what their database classified as projectile weapons. The very thought made Zex 427 emit what passed for laughter among his species, a sound remarkably similar to a garbage disposal choking on silverware. "Run me through the basics," he commanded, waving dismissively at the holographic representation of Earth. "Let's get this over with." The ship's AI chirped to life, system designation, Sol. Primary civilization location, third planet, locally designated Earth. Technology level, pre-space faring. Primary energy sources, fossil fuels and primitive nuclear fission. Military capabilities, projectile weapons, chemical propellants, basic digital systems. What the AI's sterile report failed to capture, and what would soon prove crucial, was the peculiar nature of Earth's military installations. While the hegemony sensors detected the expected array of modern military bases, they also picked up something unusual: facilities that seemed to be maintaining and preserving military equipment from various periods of human history. Deep in the bowels of the Smithsonian Institution's secure storage facility in Washington, D.C., Dr. Alexandra Chen was already beginning to understand the implications of the alien arrival. As the head of the Global Military History Archive, she had spent decades ensuring that humanity preserved not just the records of its martial past, but functional examples of military equipment from every era. The arrival of the alien fleet had triggered an automated alert in her system, not because of any advanced technology, but because of an old seismograph from 1943 that had never been deactivated. The device, designed to detect the vibrations of approaching bomber formations, had picked up the subtle tremors caused by the alien ships entering Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Chen. Her assistant, James Murray, burst into her office, tablet in hand. "Have you seen the news? The aliens, they're broadcasting some kind of ultimatum." Chen was already pulling up the emergency protocols on her computer, not the modern, network-connected one on her desk, but an old mechanical computer tucked away in the corner of her office. She had maintained it as a curiosity, a piece of history. Now it might prove to be something far more valuable. "James, I need you to contact every military history museum and archive in our network. Use the landline phones, not email or cellular. Tell them to implement Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega? James blinked in confusion. "The Restoration Protocol? But that's for preservation purposes." "Not anymore." Chen stood, moving to a large map on her wall. It wasn't digital, but rather an old-fashioned paper map with mechanical pins marking the locations of every major military history collection in the world. "We've spent decades preserving humanity's military history. Now that history might be our only hope." As James hurried to comply, Chen began making calculations on the mechanical computer. The aliens' ultimatum gave Earth 24 hours to surrender. That meant 24 hours to implement what might be the craziest military strategy in human history. In orbit, Commander Zex 427 was reviewing the final preparations for conquest when one of his tactical officers interrupted with a puzzling report. "Sir, we're detecting unusual activity at several locations across the planet's surface. The humans appear to be activating very old machinery, technology that barely registers on our scanning systems." Zex 427 made that terrible garbage disposal sound again. Probably their primitive attempt at battle preparation. Their modern systems must be failing under the stress of our presence. But Yix 299 wasn't so sure. Something about the methodical way the humans were moving their old equipment suggested purpose rather than desperation. She had studied the historical records of 17 other conquered civilizations, and none had behaved quite like this. Meanwhile, in the secure bunker beneath the United Nations, the Security Council was convening an emergency session. The alien ultimatum had been clear: surrender or face immediate military action. But as the council members filed into the chamber, they found Dr. Alexandra Chen already there, standing before a series of displays that showed not cutting-edge military technology, but images of World War II anti-aircraft guns, mechanical computers, and vacuum tube radios. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "I believe I know how we can fight back. The aliens have made a critical mistake. They've assumed that outdated technology means ineffective technology. But what they don't realize is that sometimes, the old ways are the best ways." As she outlined her plan, the council members' expressions shifted from skepticism to cautious hope. It was crazy, unprecedented, and probably impossible. But with humanity's survival at stake, impossible would have to be enough. In orbit, Commander Zex 427 added one final note to his log: discovery of Sol system complete. Primitive civilization located. Resist level expected minimal to none. Primary weapon systems laughably obsolete. Victory probability 99.999%. He would soon learn that the remaining 0.001% was about to change everything. Operation Retrograde. The Imperial War Museum in London had never been so busy at 3 in the morning. Under the cover of darkness, curators worked alongside Special Forces operators, carefully moving pieces that hadn't seen action since the Second World War. The sound of rubber wheels on marble floors echoed through the usually silent halls as priceless artifacts were transformed into humanity's last line of defense. "Careful with that Bofors gun." Dr. Margaret Whitmore, the museum's chief curator, called out to a team of Royal Marines. "That piece survived the London Blitz. I won't have it damaged by rough handling now." The Marines, despite their elite training, found themselves taking instructions from museum staff on how to operate weapons that predated their grandparents. Dr. Whitmore, a small woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, moved through the organized chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra of antiquity. "You see this?" She pointed to the mechanical computing device attached to the anti-aircraft gun. "The kerosene predictor. No electronics, no digital components. Pure mechanical engineering. The aliens won't even know it's there until it's too late." Similar scenes played out in museums and military archives across the globe. At the Museo Militar de Sevilla in Spain, curators unearthed Civil War-era radio equipment that operated on frequencies so primitive they were effectively invisible to the aliens' sophisticated scanning systems. In Beijing's Military Museum of the Chinese People's Revolution, technicians recommissioned analog radar systems that had been preserved as historical curiosities. High above Earth, Commander Zex 427 was growing increasingly puzzled by the humans' activities. His sensors showed significant movement of equipment and personnel, but much of it seemed to be centered around what his database classified as cultural preservation centers. "They appear to be emptying their museums," reported his tactical officer, confusion evident in the wobble of his sensory stalks. "The humans are moving historical artifacts to military installations." Zex 427 made that horrible garbage disposal sound that passed for laughter. Perhaps they seek comfort in their relics before surrendering. Continue monitoring, but focus on their modern military installations. Those are the only ones capable of mounting any meaningful resistance. That assumption would prove to be his third critical mistake. In Washington, D.C., Dr. Alexandra Chen had transformed the Smithsonian storage facility into an impromptu command center. Ancient teletype machines clattered alongside mechanical calculators as her team coordinated what they had dubbed Operation Retrograde. Status report, she called out, standing before a massive paper map where staff tracked deployments using colored pins and string, a system so primitive it was practically invisible to alien surveillance. The British have their coastal AA network 70% restored, reported one coordinator, reading from a vacuum tube radio transmission. The Russians have reactivated their Cold War backup systems. The Chinese are rolling out preserved artillery pieces under cover of darkness. Chen nodded, making notations with a mechanical pencil. And the Enigma network? That had been one of her most inspired ideas. The Germans had preserved several hundred Enigma machines in various museums and collections. Now, these World War II encryption devices were being used to coordinate Earth's defense. The aliens, for all their advanced quantum computers and AI systems, had never encountered such archaic encryption methods. All stations report ready, came the response. The Swiss are coordinating from their old mountain fortresses. Their mechanical computers are handling the code distribution. In orbit, Commander Yix 299 was becoming increasingly concerned. Something about the human's behavior didn't match any of the standard pre-conquest patterns she had studied. She approached Zex 427's command chair cautiously. Supreme Commander, I've been analyzing the humans' historical records. Their species has a peculiar habit of preserving and maintaining old military technology, even after it becomes obsolete. A quaint cultural practice, Zex 427 dismissed, taking another sip of his caustic beverage. Perhaps we should preserve some of their museums after the conquest. They might make interesting tourist attractions. Sir, that's just it, Yix 299 persisted. Their historical records show multiple instances where older technology proved effective against more advanced systems. Their military doctrine includes something called asymmetric warfare. She was interrupted by an alert from the tactical station. Sir, we're detecting widespread activation of primitive electromagnetic systems. The humans appear to be powering up something called vacuum tubes in massive numbers. In the skies over Earth, something remarkable was happening. The aliens' sophisticated sensor networks, designed to detect and counter modern electronic emissions, were being confronted with signals they had never been programmed to process. Vacuum tube radars, mechanical computing systems, and analog targeting computers were coming online, creating a web of detection and communication that was effectively invisible to alien surveillance. At the British Museum, Dr. Whitmore supervised the final adjustments to a restored chain-home radar station, technology that had helped win the Battle of Britain. The massive towers, hastily reassembled from preserved components, began sweeping the skies with radio waves so crude that they passed right through the aliens' electronic countermeasures. It's like trying to stop a modern computer virus with a stone axe, she explained to the RAF technicians. Their systems are so advanced, they don't even recognize this as technology. They might as well be trying to jam a sundial. In his command center within Mount Cheyenne, General Marcus Davidson watched as reports flooded in via a restored teletype network. The United States had transformed its military museums into ammunition factories, with retired machinists teaching young soldiers how to operate manual lathes and presses. They were producing ammunition and replacement parts for weapons so old they predated the microchip. Sir, his aide reported, the Smithsonian team has the Ford Island radar facility back online. It's the same equipment that was operating during Pearl Harbor. Davidson nodded grimly. History has a sense of humor, Lieutenant. On December 7, 1941, that radar spotted the Japanese attack coming, but nobody believed it. This time, we're counting on the aliens making the same mistake. As the deadline for humanity's surrender approached, Dr. Chen made her final rounds of the Smithsonian facility. Everything was in place. World War II anti-aircraft guns had been positioned on the National Mall, disguised as museum displays. Civil War-era signal mirrors had been placed on rooftops, providing a backup communication network that required no power source. Even the old Foucault pendulum in the museum's rotunda had been repurposed as part of a mechanical computing system. "They expect us to either surrender or fight with our modern weapons," she told her staff. "They've prepared countermeasures for missiles, lasers, and digital systems. But they've never faced an army that can fight effectively with technology from their grandfather's era." In orbit, Commander Zex 427 prepared to address his fleet. The deadline was approaching, and the humans had not surrendered. Their primitive attempts at preparation had provided some amusement for his crew, but now it was time to demonstrate the consequences of defying the hegemony. "Begin the attack sequence," he ordered. "Target their primary military installations with ion cannons. Their primitive electronic systems will be disabled in seconds." As the alien fleet moved into attack position, they remained unaware that humanity was about to demonstrate a crucial lesson: sometimes, the best way to move forward is to take a step back. When old meets new. The first shot of the war that would become known as the Retro Rebellion wasn't fired by an advanced alien weapon or a modern missile system. Instead, it came from a restored World War II-era Bofors 40mm anti-aircraft gun mounted on the roof of the British Museum. Dr. Margaret Whitmore stood beside the gun crew as they tracked an alien scout ship that had descended through London's cloud cover. The mechanical kerosene predictor whirred and clicked, its brass gears calculating the target's trajectory without a single electronic component. "Wait for it," she muttered, watching the alien craft through ancient optical rangefinders. Just like the V-1S in 44. The Bofors roared to life, its simple mechanical action hurling shells skyward. The alien vessel, its shields calibrated for energy weapons and smart missiles, never detected the purely kinetic projectiles. The rounds punctured its hull like needles through paper, sending it spiraling into the Thames with a tremendous splash. In orbit, Commander Zex 427's command center erupted in chaos. "Impossible," he gurgled, his purple beverage spattering across his console. "How did they penetrate the shields?" Commander Yix 299 frantically analyzed the data. "Sir, they're weapons, they're not registering on our threat detection systems. The shields were optimized for modern military technology, but they're just metal projectiles, propelled by chemical explosions." Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Beijing, preserved Japanese Type 88 75mm anti-aircraft guns, ironically now defending their former enemies, proved devastatingly effective against low-flying alien craft. Their mechanical fire control systems, operated by hand cranks and mechanical computers, were immune to the aliens' electronic warfare. At the Smithsonian, Dr. Chen coordinated the global response using a network that would have been familiar to Winston Churchill. Enigma machines chattered in secure bunkers, their mechanical encryption proving impossible for alien quantum computers to crack simply because they operated on principles so archaic they weren't even recognized as communication. Status report from the Russian front, a decoder called out, working from a paper cipher book. The preserved Stalin organ rocket batteries are proving effective. The aliens' energy shields aren't configured to stop unguided rockets. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The multiple launch rocket systems, preserved in military museums since World War II, were overwhelming alien defenses through sheer volume of fire. Their simple steel-cased rockets, lacking any electronic guidance systems, slipped through sophisticated alien countermeasures like ghosts through a wire fence. In his command chair, Zex 427 was facing the greatest crisis of his career. "Launch the ion pulse," he commanded. "Disable their primitive electronic systems." The alien fleet released a massive electromagnetic pulse designed to fry every circuit board on Earth. Cities went dark as modern infrastructure failed. But in museums and military installations worldwide, the vintage equipment hummed along unaffected. Vacuum tube radios crackled with updates, mechanical computers continued their calculations, and gun crews kept firing, guided by optical rangefinders and mechanical predictors. Sir, Yix 299 reported, her sensory stalks quivering with disbelief, the humans, they're still fighting. The ion pulse had no effect on most of their weapons. At the Imperial War Museum, Dr. Whitmore was explaining this very phenomenon to her gun crews. Vacuum tubes and mechanical computers don't care about electromagnetic pulses, she lectured, as if giving a museum tour while alien ships burned overhead. It's why the Americans hardened their nuclear facilities with this technology during the Cold War. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The alien fleet's initial attack had been predicated on quick victory through technological superiority. Instead, they found themselves being pecked to death by weapons their sensors barely registered. World War II flak guns, designed to saturate the sky with shrapnel, proved remarkably effective against alien fighter craft. Civil War-era coastal artillery, restored to working condition in maritime museums, lobbed simple iron shells that baffled alien targeting systems. At Mount Cheyenne, General Davidson watched as museum pieces turned the tide. They expected us to fight tomorrow's war, he commented to his staff. Instead, we're fighting yesterday's, and they don't know how to handle it. The aliens attempted to adapt, reconfiguring their shields to stop physical projectiles, but this left them vulnerable to other vintage weapons. When they adjusted for unguided rockets, the ancient artillery found gaps in their defenses. It was like trying to play chess against someone who insisted on playing checkers. The very simplicity of the older systems proved to be their strength. Dr. Chen's network of museums and historical archives had become a de facto alternative military command structure. The Smithsonian's rotunda now resembled Churchill's war rooms, with museum curators and military historians providing crucial intelligence about the capabilities of century-old weapons. The aliens are trying to jam our communications, reported a signals officer. Let them try, Chen replied. They can't jam signal flags and heliographs. The Royal Navy's Museum Division has restored the entire Victorian naval communications system. In orbit, Commander Zex 427 was facing a mutiny. His crew, watching sophisticated warships being damaged by weapons that belonged in museums, were losing confidence. Supreme Commander, Yix 299 ventured, perhaps we should consider a tactical retreat. Our shields were designed to defend against advanced energy weapons and cyber attacks. We never considered, we never imagined, that their primitive weapons would be our undoing. Zex 427 finished bitterly. That their technological regression would prove to be a strategic advantage. A massive explosion rocked the flagship. On the tactical display, a formation of preserved B-17 flying fortresses, restored to flying condition by aviation museums, was conducting a bombing run straight out of 1945. Their simple iron bombs, lacking any electronic guidance systems, were invisible to the fleet's modern countermeasures. The war was far from over, but humanity had achieved something remarkable. By reaching into its past, it had found a way to fight for its future. Museums had become armories, curators had become commanders, and the preserved relics of old wars were proving that age didn't always mean obsolescence. As night fell over the Smithsonian, Dr. Chen received reports of alien ships retreating to higher orbits, their commanders struggling to adapt to a form of warfare they had dismissed as primitive. She stood at her window, watching tracer fire arc through the darkening sky, and thought about how history had a way of repeating itself, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. They thought our history was our weakness, she mused, watching a formation of vintage aircraft pass overhead. They never considered that it might be our strength.